Hello and a very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, thanks for joining us. It is your weekly program that allows Barbadians the opportunity to share that rich history and heritage of their communities and so enrich the lives of all of us. As promised, Austin Husbands is back. He begins this week with that interplay of the people and businesses. Take it over, Mr. Husbands.
But getting back to those skilled tradesmen, the meat shops, the families, Speightstown was so vibrant in the late 50s, early 1960s. And then all of a sudden things just went downhill. One or two of the proprietors passed away. They passed the business went on to somebody else and didn't quite attract the same number of people. And fewer people started coming into Speightstown. But the one place that fought that was the James, well, the two places rather, was the James Griffith shop, because that was the first shop this side of the island to have a jukebox. So people still went in to punch their tunes, in the jukebox. And there was also an entertainment center, so there was boxing upstairs. So you would have the odd boxing match, food eating competition. That's another one that didn't quite work out so well for one of the residents of Speightstown. He bet he eat 10 pounds of cheese without water. Lost the bet, of course. On his way home, a fella gave him a belly searcher, because he said, "You make me lose my money, I bet on you." And the cheese came out whole. But La was a very good worker, though. He worked for sanitation, and he kept Speightstown very clean. May he rest in peace. The other place was obviously what was called the Sand Shop, renamed by a youngster called Junior, better known as Clement Armstrong. And he renamed it the Fisherman's Pub. So those two places were the ones that went through thick and thin in the 70s when Speightstown started to take a dive. And they are both still standing. Junior is in there now. He always brags that that's the only job he's ever had. He knows nothing else but the Fisherman's Pub. And he's a year behind me. Yeah. So I don't think he will ever retire. Maybe R-E-T-Y-R-E, but he will never R-E-T-I-R-E. And he's there every day except when he takes a vacation, which is not that often. And that particular bar has done extremely well, in keeping the name Speightstown flowing.
Commerce is a major part of this community. In fact, it evoked memories of shopping at many of the establishments here over the years. Austin Husbands takes a closer look at a number of those business establishments.
We also had some prominent people. I mentioned K&R Husbands, Doc Husbands, who was the first black Speaker of the House of Assembly. And he became Speaker in 1948. He had expressed an interest in running for St. James before that. Obviously, elections were held every 3 years at that time. And in 1948, he became a member of Parliament for St. Peter. And I distinctly recall reading in the archives where he proposed that the bridge around the town, which had been damaged, and the bridge in Speightstown, which had also been damaged by a bad flood just a year or so before. And he had made this proposal that those two bridges needed to be repaired immediately. So he did not live to see it, but the bridge around the town is now complete. So the husband's wish in that respect came true. And then soon after that, then he was made the Speaker of the House Assembly. Retained his seat in 1951. But then in 1956, H.G. Gordon Cummings, who was then Deputy Premier, became the Speaker of the House of Assembly and replaced Doc. And that is where his departure from the Barbers Labour Party gradually went to, you know, created that I would say anger, but akin to anger within him. So come but he, like I said, come 1961 though, but there were still double member constituencies at the time. That eventually went into play again because of an incident that occurred around the town, where the microphone was removed from in front of his face when he meant to speak. I was there, standing next to the car with his ever so faithful buddies, Mosquito, don't remember his name, that's all I knew him as, John Burke, Wendy's father, and Alan Fox, was it, right? And they said, this cannot happen to you, Mr. Speaker. And you stand up and tell him that you'll run as an independent. He eventually ran as the lone member of the Barbers Labour Party. And that was the circulars that we distributed. Because you know, you got a little $5 bill for distributing the circulars. And so we would write the circulars and distribute them on his behalf. Then back in 1966 again, he ran for St. Peter and became the senior member of Parliament at that time. So then a bit later on, he and the party had a falling out, and eventually he joined the Democrat Labour Party as Minister of Agriculture, and Tourism. Then there was Elmer Jordan, whose family owned a few stores in Speightstown, and who brought the first supermarket to this part of the island, which was Elmer Supermarket. It's now a mall on the other side of the street, and he had Elmer's Supermarket. He bought the Methodist Manse and incorporated that building into the supermarket. That part of the building is now Dollar Wise, the Dollar Wise store. But that was the Methodist Manse, where the Reverend, that was his residence. So Elmer set up the supermarket, and then on the other side he had Elmer's Snacket. Very popular place. We tried to compete with Elmer's Snacket when we opened a restaurant on the other opposite the Church of God, something called Burger B. Burger B lasted a little while, but we were no competition for Elmer because Elmer's Supermarket was known for their homemade hamburgers. And people would go there and line up, right? And as a boy, we would put money together, 3 or 4 of us, and we would go, so we would buy a quarter pound of nuts, peanuts and salted nuts that came down and they kept fresh in the, right? And then we would buy a hamburger, a hot dog, a malted milk, milkshake or whatever else, right? And we would share, and we would split those nuts and the hamburger and the hot dog in 3. And that was our Friday night fun. My buddy Oriel Burnett was we were reminiscing about that just a few days ago. And you know, we were trying to compare where you could get the best snacks. We still believe that the best fish cakes were in Roadview, which was just by Miss Sandyford's shop. And Elmer's didn't do fish cakes. But there was, Miss Hope did fish cakes in Speightstown. But we were trying to compare. Miss Hope fish cakes were of very good quality as well. So Elmer was a member of what was the vestry at the time. So he was a vestryman and on the church council, right, St. Peter Parish Church Council, for a lot of years. His body is also interred in the St. Peter Parish churchyard. The Methodist minister, there was for a short time Reverend Saunders down here. He would come down occasionally. But the one that really left his mark down here was Reverend Lawrence, right? One of the most soft-spoken preachers, but very much a community man. He was always in the community, whether you were Anglican, Methodist, Pentecostal, right? Whatever. Reverend Lawrence was your friend, and he would stop and chat with you. Even when he had retired and lost his sight, he would come back into Speightstown, and he knew people's voices, right? Reverend Lawrence was a gem, a real gem. He was very much involved in the community. My early memories of St. Peter Parish Church would include Reverend Alfred John Hatch, the father of Andrew Hatch. And then we always call him, behind his back, of course, Hatchie. Whenever there was Hatchie's excursion, you would have a line of buses from the bus stand down there all the way past here, going past where the Fisherman's pub is. A line of buses. And usually, or the picnic, right, the excursion, not picnic, that excursion went to King George V Park. Reverend Fitzroy Pestana came afterwards, and he was here for a number of years. He also had success. The St. Peter Parish Church Fair had to be, and that was held on Easter Monday, every Easter Monday. My band at the time, I played with a band called Electrons. We started in 1965 when I was at school, and we played a couple of times for that church fair. And it was usually, as these youngsters said, it was usually bursts. You know, people from all over the island came to St. Peter Parish Church Fair. Like I said, we would go around from one church to the other. Here, let's face it, we didn't have a lot of entertainment. So as young children, we would go to practically every church, from the Gospel Hall, which is just over here, right around, you know, all around Speightstown. Going to Church of God. We'd go to the Seventh-day Adventist Church because my neighbors in Roadview, the Westermans, one was Seventh-day Adventist, the mother, and their husband was an Anglican. But Sarsfield Westerman would sometimes go to his church there, and his daughter, Clarita, I called her Fee because I couldn't say Rita. So it was easy for me. I formed myself same as Peter. And it ended up as Fee. She was one of the neighborhood midwives. So quite often she would leave home in the wee hours of the morning, someone would come and pick her up on a bicycle and take her somewhere to deliver baby. So we would go to the Seventh-day Adventist Church with her sometimes, because she would sometimes be an Anglican, and sometimes she would be, I think, because she was very close to her mother and father. There was also another midwife called Gaskin, who lived on Diamond Rock Corner. That is now a bar called Dick and Jean's Bar that's attached to that property. Then right next to that, where the Kierna Husbands Highway passes through, that is, next door to that was a guy called Harry Corbin, who has now passed on as well. That shop was demolished after a while. On the Diamond Rock Corner side, there was a guy called Gung. Hazel Cox was his name. And Hazel Cox ran a rum shop. The house was just set back, and right beside that was the Pentecostal church. The funny thing is that people knew how to keep it down. When the churches were going. But then you wouldn't believe that some of the same people who come to keep noise were the congregants of the church next door. But that's a story for another time. I don't want to divulge too many secrets. the thing that I really like about Speightstown is that we've kept it not quaint and old, but those who have come in and not tried to modernize Speightstown to the point where you don't recognize it. And I sincerely hope that we can keep that going, because if we can't, you know, like, we have our own culture, our own history, and we don't want to lose that at all. We Speightstonians, I like to refer to us as Speightstonians, we would not like to see our culture, and which is, you know, the built culture, go the way that I've seen other places go. You know, I mean, yes, I know that sometimes things have to go, but if we don't have to go that route to be relevant. So, with regards to Speightstown, I really, I mean, it hurt my heart when I saw that Saheli building. I was showing you a thing that my father had painted in late 29, early 1930, of what was the Saheli building that later became owned by Rafik Khoury. And I still have the original painting at home, but I made some prints on canvas as a memento to him, and also to pass on to other people who want to see what Speightstown looked like. And I sincerely hope that we don't have this mass demolition. Whoever comes in and invests. And I was thinking along the lines of a Speightstown corporation, where, you know, people could put some money in and have people who have heritage at heart come in and look at restoration. I saw something similar in England, in a place called the Shambles in York. And that reminded me of down here, this part, Orange Street, and Old Church Street. So, you know, from that point of view, I thought at the time, wow. So when that building was demolished, that was really upsetting. But we had business people, like we're the Alderley brothers. Shortly after Mr. Alderley moved out, there was Excel supermarket in there, right? And there was a fire in Church Street. And they happened to be living on Church Street at the time. That fire affected not only the Wally's building, but then it spread to the building next door. Not Wally's, the Excel. So Wally's took over afterwards, and built his own property and his name, running that place for many, many years. But I was actually at home that night when the fire broke out. And it started in the day. And I had to, the firemen couldn't find a way to get in, because next door were the Jamots, who, Jamots and World, because the company was known as World Jamot. Because Jamot was Ben, who was married to one of the Worlds. Then next door was Irving World, whose sister was the same Clara Jamot, Benjamin's wife. And then there was another sister who was very much involved in the Salvation Army that worked, because Clara ran a shop there in Church Street as well. And upstairs was their sister, Mrs. Squires, who was a brilliant seamstress, who also taught a lot of young ladies the art of dressmaking. So the building where the fire broke out, and they couldn't find anybody to get in. So I volunteered and climbed up the pole. And looked back and made a joke to the fireman. I kicked on the thing. I said, no, don't charge me with breaking and entering, because the police were there. So everybody started laughing. But they were able then to save what is now the Eddie's Feed Store. Right? That was all part of that building. I'm told that the William Spike buildings along there, that was part of William Spike building, and that the building in which we lived was William Spike's residence, that he has sold on to another merchant, who eventually ended up in the hands of Captain Jordan, from whom my grandfather bought that property for the princely sum of $200 sometime in the early 1900s. I'm not sure if my grandfather paid the full bill, that's why. because I know there was some $35 or $40 remaining. But I haven't got the receipts. I've only got the deeds. And I know, that's why I know the price was $200 that he paid Captain Jordan. That was one of the William Spike buildings. But as you come further down now, after the fire of the XL, and the XL moved out, Wally moved to that property. Wally was on the other side of the road, further down before. And Wally moved in there. They built this nice new building. And Wally was very helpful to parents who needed assistance, especially for uniforms for children. But I knew Wally when he had a motorcycle and used to ride around selling things. That dates me. Yeah, I'm 72. Not 1972, 72 years old. And he too was an extremely friendly businessman. Worked very hard, worked very, very hard. Looked after his staff very well. I think he had people who worked there with him from inception. So that would tell you the kind of person it was. If you come a bit further down now, there was a house between where Wally's was and the Fredericks lived in that house. Their mom, who only passed away a week ago at 103, Enid Frederick, she sold from a tray. She sold nuts and practically anything. Enid was, and she always had a little bit of advice to give you, even if you don't take it. You know, that kind of character. 4 or 5 of her children are my father's godchildren. And we remained very close, especially her daughter Pearline, who, she's now Pearline Ward, from Portland, right? And Pearline, you know, has got a lot of life, and you know, she was my sister's contemporary at Alexander School. But Pearline is a lot of feisty, like Enid was. God rest her in the grave. So there was Enid who lived in that house there, and then she sold. But she later on moved to around the town, when that building was eventually demolished. And next door then was Mr. Jemmott, another Jemmott. I don't know if he was related to Ben Jemmott, but he was a bit of a builder, and his son Vallis, another quiet individual with a smile as broad as Speightstown, you know, and always another man who would just stand and talk to me and my, you know, other people in the neighborhood, as if you were, you know, his own children. He had time for children. I think his son is now involved in Notes of Praise. A good, very good musician. Although I think you know, there were others who were good, but I know that Vallis's daughter, there's one called Debbie, has a voice like an angel, right? She's, you know, I've listened to her perform with her cousin and other people. She has a voice, like, as I said, like an angel. On the corner of that, on the same side as Vallis, where Eddie's now has a boutique, and is where Eddie's supermarket actually started, right? But before that, that was owned by a man called Shepherd, right? Before that, it was owned by N.S. Sainsbury. There was a Sainsbury's in Barbados. One thing, and it's repeated. So when people talk about Sainsbury, I say, yes, there was an N.S. Sainsbury in Speightstown. I don't know if they were connected to one in the UK, but we had a Sainsbury there, and there was a man named, we call him Shepherd, who ran the thing there, and then there was Nobriga. I think Nobriga might have come from somewhere in South America, but he wasn't in Speightstown very long. And on that corner, on that same corner, on the other side of the road now, was the Fredericks store, which was run by a man called Kesaram. And right next to that, which is now restaurant and bar, there was a store called the Juju Store. It was run by a man called, I am not sure if it was Adari Akib or Akib Adari, because sometimes he would come into, he was one of our customers, and he would come into the bank and say, Adib Akari. And I said, or isn't it Akari Adib? Same thing, same thing, same thing. So I always found it amusing. So I didn't know if to call him Mr. Adib or Mr. Akari. So I would always say, Mr. Adib Akari, right? And he would respond. And he ran the Juju Store. In that same area, the one that is over there, the Bridge Store. The Bridge Store was there. Before it actually moved to over there. So it's never actually been on the bridge. It's been always near the bridge. And I'd have to find out why, but the owner's gone now, but so I don't know why he called it the Bridge Store.
Aspects of the life and magic as seen through the lens of a Speightstonian Austin husband. These are but a few of the many stories that made this community so special for Barbadians. Now, in every presentation, there is a number of theses waiting to be developed by our students or anyone who has an interest in Barbadian history. I challenge you to see Austin Husband's presentation as primary research. Take it up and conduct further research and write our own history. Barbadian history written by our people. This has been Mind Community. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Every blessing.